Hi, it's Dr. Parikh, and I'm going to walk you through how to update your overview paragraphs. These you had in your, I believe you just wrote them in your template, so in that full paper. And now I want you to basically do the same thing. This is the point where you're transitioning into making what used to be your literature review paper into your research proposal. Partly because you're done sending me versions of that paper. I've looked at the final one, I've given you feedback, we're done. So you can start updating that document. The easiest way to go over it is to show you the rubric. So as a reminder, every assignment should have a rubric. If it doesn't, let me know as soon as possible. I've made one for it. It just may not have gotten connected correctly. So you can click here. So at the top of the assignment, it says the due date. So it tells you exactly when something is due, how many points it's out of, and then there's a button, click to view rubric. So let me show you that. And the rubrics are very detailed for this class, and that's because this is the main way that I give you feedback about your paper, and that's what enables me to give so many assignments and give individual feedback on each. There's just not, with up to 20 students in a class, there's just no way I could give this level of feedback if I had to do individual comments for everything I wanted to tell you about. I know it would be nice as a student to have that, but it's just not possible. So especially for an online class where I don't get to sit with you, these really detailed rubrics are honestly the best way I can communicate. And then I can also add on comments as needed. So I go through sort of each thing, what needs to be there. And you'll see a lot of it is kind of the same as what I've had for other paper rubrics. I try to keep the rubrics somewhat similar from assignment to assignment when it's over the same topics. But you can see I have a specific one that talks about how it's updated. So up here where it says abstract content, it just says provides complete overview of paper, including clear thesis, themes, and at least one main limitation. And so that's going to be the same as before. And so it helps you kind of get your attention drawn because I have one that's just the abstract updated, and you can see this update is worth 3 times as much as the rest. So typically, as these assignments obviously build on each other. So the way I do the rubrics is I still am looking at the same things often, but it's worth less. It's whatever's new this time that's worth more points. So I want to see that it's been updated to reflect your new research proposal. So I focus on, so for the abstract, it's mostly going to be that you're going to talk about your research question or hypothesis, but also when you name at least one limitation, it needs to be a limitation of your study, not of the literature. So roadmap paragraph, again, roadmap updated. So I want to see the research question, and you may have adjusted your themes somewhat. You may have changed the headings a little bit. Basically any changes you made to make it flow from an introduction, so that the introduction flows logically into the research proposal part, the present study, method, results. Any changes you make sure you go back and make them in the roadmap paragraph. I just dipped my finger in my tea. It's a great morning in the Parikh household. Discussion section, you're going to do a lot of updating in the discussion section overall, but for the summary paragraph, So for the discussion section, sorry, I got a little lost for a minute. Here, this is the summary paragraph that's going to change the most. And I've really represented that here in the rubric because I'm actually looking at, each of these items is tailored to this new piece. So remember that you may need to update your thesis statement to keep the focus on your research question. And then you're going to talk about your hypothesis, and then your context. Now you'll notice in the rubric, sometimes I have, each box has a description. Other times, only the full points box has a description, or the full points box and the no points box. And sometimes that depends on how specific I want to be. For example, with citations, I wanted to make sure that I was consistent from person to person in what I penalized. And so one of them is you got the source right, but you didn't cite it correctly. The next one, well, the source isn't really appropriate, but hey, you cited it well. And then we have, okay, your sources are inappropriate and you didn't cite them correctly. And then finally we have where you actually plagiarized. And I do have in the full points box marked that, if your paragraph was very broad, you may not have needed any citations. And just as a reminder, if you're referring to an idea from another paper and you don't cite it, that is actually plagiarism. That would be plagiarism being present. That's not necessarily the kind of plagiarism that I typically come down on really hard. That's not typically something that you would get, a 0 for the assignment or a report to the BPIA, unless it's something where we had a lot of words about it and you still didn't change it. That might prompt some consequences. But just, an accidental, I didn't include a citation, it is plagiarism, and so I do want to draw your attention to that. I want to take off some points for it, but I know students often get a little anxious when I talk about plagiarism because I am very serious about it, but students sometimes freeze up because they are so terrified of making a mistake with me. The mistakes that I take most seriously are word-for-word copying. The others, like I said, I take that more, I will take away some points for it, I'll talk with you, and if you were to repeatedly do it after I've given you feedback, like you don't change it, especially if it's throughout your paper, at that point there would be an issue. I call those students who get frozen with anxiety about plagiarism, I call them my worried well, because usually if you're that concerned about it, you're probably not going to do the things that I'm really wanting you to avoid anyway. And so then I still give you a point just for having kind of updated your discussion section in general. And you can see again, I try to give the points based on how much updating each section is going to need. And then the conclusion, so you will be mentioning your research question or hypothesis. You're going to kind of switch the sense of purpose for this conclusion. I think those are pretty much all the changes to the rubric, but it's always helpful before you submit an assignment. I know these rubrics are really long, but it's still helpful to go through. And again, as you go through, you'll notice there's a lot of similarities from one assignment to another. And so you can go through and say, okay, did I do this? Anytime you have a question about, I'm not sure how to do this section, I'm not sure what she's looking for here, the rubric is a wonderful place to look, because most things have a template or an outline or something, but not absolutely everything does. And even if those documents aren't really helping you, the rubric is a great place to look, because I've tried to make it as specific as possible so that I can easily give you feedback on anything that you're not doing well on. So that's how you update your overview paragraphs. You are getting so close. You're writing in the full document. It's getting exciting.